to Sacred Space with Tanika Lace, the podcast. Today's episode is so exciting and so educational, I find, for women and for men to just really understand how powerful the woman's body can be in birth and how it doesn't have to be a completely painful and like traumatizing experience. We can actually create safety in this. And yeah, so Emma is from Peace Love Alchemy. She is here to empower women to trust themselves and their bodies and take their power back. She is so inspirational. I've loved hearing her story on here, and she also has lots posted over on her Instagram at peace.love.alchemy. So I'll leave it all in the show notes below, but I really hope you enjoy this episode. And as usual, if you do, leave me a little review. I would absolutely love that. Anyway, let's get into the episode. Welcome, Emma from Peace Love Alchemy. It's so exciting to have you. How are you?
I'm good. Very
good to have you on. So would you like to give us the quote of the week?
So literally you asked me this and I was like, I have no idea what to say. And then this morning in my meditation, it was literally it just dropped in. It was like, don't force, just flow. So
I love
I'm feeling that. Yeah.
I love that. And also when you said it, it reminds me of, I don't know if you do as much anymore, but like you used to always go sit on the beach and record the waves and drink your cacao.
Yeah.
And it's like,
I miss that. I don't. But yes.
Well, you just haven't had a baby, so it's probably a bit different.
Yes.
But that quote even just like feels like your vibe. Just like flow.
Yeah.
Yeah, it might not be how you feel all the time now. But
trying to embody that, yes.
And do you have a self-love ritual?
So obviously, yes, with 2 young children, self-love and finding that time is a little bit hard, but my non-negotiable little self-love ritual is my morning meditation and breath work. So it's normally about 15 minutes, and yeah, that's my bare minimum. If I've got time and the kids are behaving, then it will go longer. Yeah.
Beautiful. And do they usually allow you the spaciousness?
Day dependent. She's normally fine. I literally ask my guides, I'm like, guides, can you just keep Daisy entertained? I just need this time. And they're like, yep. And so she'll just be like gooing and garring and you know, having her own little time. But Charlie, on the other hand, he'll be like, Mum, can I join you? Mum, can I play the drum? Mum, what are you doing? I'm like, just trying to meditate, Charlie, but you know, it's okay. I'm doing my best here.
Having mum time.
Yeah. And I'm just like, you know how you get like to do anything you want? Sometimes mum just needs that.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to like model that for the kids too, and that's like my non-negotiable. But he's definitely, once I get into the routine of it, he's like, oh mum, are you doing your sacred time? I'm like, yes. And he's just like, but can you make me breakfast first? I'm like, fine.
Eat that.
And then I'm like, have your breakfast, this is my time. And then so
that's so special. And I love how you said modeling for your kids, because that then teaches him, when he wants his sacred time, that that he can set that boundary safely.
Yes.
Because even, you know, growing up, it was so different for us. And it's 100%. Like being able to then bring this into society. Whereas like your children, they're going to have such a different like...
I hope so.
It feels like, I mean, who I surround myself with, it's different. There's probably still like a lot of that old conditioning playing out a lot, but it's just so special. But I would love to sort of speak into your birth with Charlie.
Yeah.
Before we jump into your free birth with Daisy.
Okay, so with Charlie, I'll start with the beginning. He was basically what we call a Tinder surprise. So a bit of a funny story. Jake and I did meet on Tinder, and yes, we are still together now. 8 years on, and we'd only been together for about 6 months, and then we fell pregnant, and it just happened really quick, and it was kind of like, okay, what do we do? So I was, very young, party girl, was kind of not equipped, but it was the way of the universe saying like, you have two paths in life. It's like, go down this route, kind of go to self-destruction, learn your lessons that way, or become a mother and do it that way.
Be forced to do it.
So I was like, okay, well, we'll go down the baby route. So, that was a little bit of context around that. So I guess I was quite, I've always been really headstrong, and I knew that I was going to have a natural birth. At that point, free birth or home birth, I didn't really know much about it, because I read a stat the other day, it's literally like less than 1% of all births in Australia are home birth.
What?
And I was like, that is just crazy. And hopefully this is going to change. But so it really wasn't a thing. And I just kind of was, in this space of like, yeah, I'm headstrong. I'm not going to have any pain relief. You know, I'm just going to have it as natural as I can. So I did like all the research. I'm kind of like a serial researcher. So I'm like, what can I do? Like looking up all the things. I'm like, okay, I've got this plan. I'm going to do delayed cord clamping, no medications. Yeah. You know, had all these things mapped out. So we get to the hospital, and, you know, a lot of the time women have these plans in place and the hospital can kind of somewhat derail that. And I guess I didn't really know. I guess I was kind of just so naive and so headstrong that I was just like, they're not going to like detract me from, you know, what I want, and this is how it's going to be. And yeah, so I guess we get to the point of, you know, labour's imminent, and I was having an appointment with a midwife, and this was on the Friday and Charlie's due date was on the Sunday, and she was like, so they have this thing in hospital, 40 weeks is the grand grail, and you have to have birth, like you have to birth either on that point or before, and if you go after, like, it's not allowed. So I remember the midwife being like, so, you know, due date's coming up, you need to have this baby, otherwise you're going to book in with the obstetrician and they're going to talk about induction. I was like, induction? I was like, no, that's not happening. So I was like, I'm going to make this baby come. So she was really lovely. She was like, you know, you just need to set the mood, you know, get the oxytocin flowing, and, you know, that will help encourage baby. And I was like, okay, I can do that. And then so I go home that afternoon, and like I'm like, Jake, we've got to have a romantic night out. Like our romantic night was literally burgers, and we sat in a nice, we were on the Gold Coast at the time, we sat on Kira Hill, and we had our burgers by candlelight. It was very romantic. And then so we get home, and then that night my waters broke, and then I was like, okay, this is happening. But then
the power of intention.
Yeah, right? So me being this little blasé thing, and this comes back to my stubbornness, and I'm like, I'm having this baby, like it's coming out. And I guess, that whole, we'll touch on this with when I come around to Daisy, but, you know, each birth is so different. But yeah, so waters break, nothing happens, and I'm like, oh, okay, so nothing's happening. We go to the hospital because we only live 2 minutes away, and I was like, you know, I think my waters are broken. They check, they're like, yep. They're like, just go home, go to sleep, and like come back the next day, and we'll like discuss options. I'm like, okay. So I go home and then try to get to some sleep. I wake up and I have like little mini contractions and stuff, and I'm like, oh, something's happening. This is exciting. We're kind of getting this point, and then we basically, things start to ramp up. That was like, you know, in the middle of the night, I think I woke up. So we basically got no sleep. And then by 5 a.m, I was like, okay, take me to the hospital, Jake. This is it. It's happening. So we get to the hospital, and then that was about 5 a.m. And I remember watching the sunrise and being like, okay, you know, I didn't get much sleep, and I'm kind of running a bit low on energy at the moment, but we got this. So we get there, and I guess I don't really know how much detail you want me to go into with
whatever
this.
Feels true for you. I feel like this is such a natural, like normal thing for women, but also the experience in hospitals I feel like it needs to be spoken about. Yeah, 100%. Because especially being a young woman and, you know, feeling like I've got this in my body, I've got this, and then, you know, I don't know this full story, but it's really feeling like it's leaning into, you almost felt like that you got this was taken away from you. Yeah. That's so common. Yeah. So speak away.
Okay, so we get to hospital, and like I can't fault the midwives, they were amazing and everything like that. But I remember being at home, and like I felt like I was in the bath, and like things were happening really quick. And I think had I just let myself stay in that safe space and not have to like get in the car and like go to the hospital, things probably would have happened a lot quicker. And I guess I'm lucky with Charlie, like it was still quite a quick birth. Like he was born, you know, we got to hospital at 5 a.m. that morning, and then he came in by 12 o'clock. So it was still like, for a first labour, it was still pretty short. But anyway, so we get to hospital, and, you know, then things sort of start to slow down, and you're kind of like, oh, what's happening? And then they were really good, the midwives. They were kind of just letting me go with the flow. It was lucky that on that ward on that particular day it was quiet. So I feel like when they're busy, they kind of like want to hurry you along, and, you know, that can sometimes lead to interventions that aren't quite necessary. So anyway, so it was good. There was like, I think me and like one other woman on the ward, and it just basically gave us time and space to just kind of be and just let the motions kind of flow. And then I remember, so The thing with Charlie's birth, I literally, as soon as my contractions started, the body does a wonderful thing in trying to clear your pathways. And this was one thing that I was not prepared for. And I'm not a great vomiter. And I started vomiting. And I basically vomited the entire labour. And not only vomited, but also diarrhea. Yeah. And now I understand and know that's actually your body's way of like clearing the pathways, making sure there's enough space for baby to come through. But that was like one curveball that like I'd done all this research and I was like, what the hell is happening? And then the midwife said, oh, that's fine. That's great. That means you're progressing. And I was like, this is not okay. But what a rebirth for you in that moment too. Like, I obviously haven't had children, so I'm not super educated in on this, but I would be the same as you in that circumstance. I'd be researching everything, making sure I understand it all. But you even just saying that, it's like our bodies are so powerful. Yeah. It's like it literally knew. Like it was
are like shifting into mum now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. And so I guess like that was one sort of curveball that I was just not prepared for. So that kind of like, I think stalled labour, because like after vomiting for hours on end and not being able to hold down fluids, I'm in the hospital and they're kind of like, look, if you can't hold down fluids, like we're going to have to talk about drip and like things are going to have to start to escalate, blah, blah, blah. So I'm like, shit, like that's not happening. And the only intervention that I did have in the hospital, it was literally at like, I don't know, 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock. And they were like, why don't we give you this anti-nausea injection? And I was like, please, thank you, that would be great. Had that, and then the vomiting stopped, and then labour really picked up and that sort of thing. So that was one little thing that I guess could have been a horrible way to cascade down. But again, I would just praise myself that my head was so strong, and I was like, nope. Like, and I literally, I think they did ask me like a few times before, like, we've got this thing, and I was like, no, nothing, don't give me anything, like I'm anti that. And then it got to the point of like surrender, and I was like, look, I just got to that point of no energy, no nothing. And I can see how easily women can fall into that space of, it's not really in their wants or their needs. You've got this pressure, you're exhausted, you're kind of like, you come to this point and you're just like, someone just save me.
And it's like that piece of, like even just everyday life, it's like so important to try and choose love over fear.
Yeah.
If you're vomiting and diarrheaing in a room full of people you don't even fucking know, might not have a supportive partner, haven't prepared yourself at all, of course you're going to say, like, put anything into my body.
Yeah,
because
help me here.
You just like, you give up on yourself because you don't believe in yourself.
Yeah, 100%.
That's where I feel like that.
Yeah. And so I guess that's the other thing that I guess I'm really proud of myself, even though I didn't really have any kind of spiritual awareness, like deep in my body, I guess I did. Like I did have that internal knowing, and I guess it came from another point, maybe more of an egoic point of that, just headstrong. Like I just knew, like, no. And I remember, you hear as you're pregnant and everyone will be like, oh, so, how are you going to plan your birth and what are you going to do? And they're like, oh, and I'm medicated, but oh, good luck. Like they would just have like push all of these stories onto you. And I was just
I've even said like, at this age, like I'm not ready for children for a few years, but I've already said like, I'm having an unmedicated birth, water birth. Yeah. And I've had so many projections already. I'm like, can't wait till I'm pregnant.
Just get ready to be like, thanks, that's your stuff. I'm not taking that on. And so, I guess I was just really fortunate that I was able to kind of detach from that and be like, okay, that's their story. That's not my stuff. So it's really interesting that, even not being, calling myself awake or woke, that I still kind of was. And that was my initiation into that. Anyways, I feel like I've detracted, just trying to remember where I am at. So basically the other thing, so my mum, I wanted my mum there for my birth, and she was driving up from Sydney and I was on the Gold Coast, and I'd messaged her that night. They were literally leaving, I think Friday afternoon, and they were going to stop over and stay at Foster, which is about halfway.
So beautiful.
Yeah. And so I remember messaging my mum at like 11, being like, what is it broken? Nothing's happened, like blah, blah, blah. And mum got that like mother's intuition. Like they got up at 4 a.m. Like, she's like, we have to drive. Like we've got to be there. She's going to have this baby. And so they, woke up and continued the journey on. And then I remember the midwives being like, the Jake was in commune with mum being like, yep, she's here. They're coming, blah, blah, blah. And then they finally got there, and it was like, I think at about 11 o'clock. And then the midwives were like, and that's when things just stalled. And like, I was kind of like, oh, and I could have easily kind of been pushed into that. Okay, you're failing to progress. Like we're going to talk about, ramping things up, whether we're going to start to do any further, like assisted delivery things or anything like that. Or even talking about like Caesar. And then they're like, oh, we better monitor the baby. Is it going into distress? And then this one midwife, so my mum gets there, and then like I was basically like full-blown active labor. Like,
Yeah.
and the midwife was like, your soul and your body was just waiting for your mum. Like, you just needed to feel safe and held in that space to like, you know, let things unfold. And it literally was the case. So I got... Mum rocks up at 11 o'clock. Dad's also there because he was kind of just like dropped her off and was like, oh, I'm just going to go say hey. And then so this really beautiful thing happened. My dad was actually in the birth room as well as my mum. And I think it was really beautiful for him to witness a birth because mum's births with me and my brother were quite traumatic. And so I think for him to kind of see it from still in a hospital, but for it to not be so traumatic or, you know, emergency like, I think that was quite healing for him.
Yeah.
And it was almost like this thing, he was kind of like, should I go? Should I stay? Like, I don't really know what to do. And I was like, I don't care, Dad. Like, whatever, I'm just in this. And
it's
so
like he was wanting you to be like, stay, because it's like that weird,
I think, and so I think that was a really beautiful experience to have. And then, so, well, lo and behold, Charlie came out, you know, we had no interventions, no medications, no nothing. The only thing was that anti-nausea injection. And then when you have your third stage, which is the delivery of your placenta, I also wanted to make sure, like in hospital, it's just routine that they give you an injection to help speed the hormonal things up to let your body release it.
Oh, okay.
Which our body naturally is designed. Once we have the baby and the oxytocin flows, it's like helps us release that placenta. So we already have that programmed within our bodies, but for some reason the hospital system likes to get things out because of risk of hemorrhage and this and that. But from the research that I've read and the stories I've heard, there's generally more risks of bleedings and things that happen when they rush that.
Yeah.
So I remember the midwife being like, well, we have this here just in case you start to bleed out or blah, blah, blah. And then like my placenta literally...
But the fear in saying that...
Like, it's literally just all fear-based. Like, it's just, I can't even tell you. And that's the other thing I forgot to mention. So with Charlie, I also wanted to have the water birth, and I remember being in the bath and like things were kind of just slowing down. I probably wasn't in the right positions and things like that. And then, you know, I've got this midwife being like, oh, should we check you? Should we see what's happening? Blah, blah, blah. It's coming on too slow now. And then they were like, oh, we better just monitor the baby. We need to get you out of the bath. So they put this like monitor thing around my belly. And they were like, well, he's going into fetal distress. Like, we need to get this baby out. And I was just like, in me, like, I knew everything was fine. Like, I didn't have that, like, mother's thing of, like, there's something wrong with my baby. Yeah. Like, you know, as a mother, you do get that.
But being a first-time mum, they were probably more... You know, she doesn't know any better. Yeah. So let's say this. So
And like, that's the other thing. It's like the way I sort of paint this picture, I'm making it out like the medical professionals are bad. Like they're not. And I know that that's not the way they come from. But I think it's just the way that they've been taught is from that fear perspective. And I understand, like, you know, they have medical due diligence. Like if something goes wrong or, you know, something bad happens, like it does fall back on them. So I can understand that, and by no means like bagging out, like I love our medical professionals and things like that, but I just think the way we need to do birth is going to be very different, and I think these care models need to change. So I just wanted to preface that and as well also,
and that's like such a beautiful thing to preface, but also a lot of the midwives and nurses and, you know, people who have trained, like you said, it is fear-based.
Yes.
They actually don't know any better.
Exactly.
Like they haven't had this further education on. But, like, as women, our body is actually...
It has all the mechanisms like designed to do this.
Yes, like, we are made to do this. Like, we are one with nature. Like, look at even our cycle with the seasons. Like, it's just that piece has been left out of it. So, of course, the fear's left there. And when you feed into fear, it grows. And it just makes sense.
100%.
So, I agree. Like, we are so lucky in Australia to have the medical system we have. But these stories are still so valid because the lack of education. It always comes back to that.
Exactly. And that's it. And it's just like, I think, like, how, with the amount of information that we have access to, how can we lack education? And I guess there's a whole different, that can go down a whole different other rant and spiel on that. But, it's just one of those things where I guess it's the system. The system, and, you know, that is probably the biggest thing, and that's why it led me to then choose free and home birth for Daisy. But anyways, again, another detraction. I'm very, very great at that.
Me too. If you've listened to any other of my episodes, I pull myself up and I'm like, this episode is not about this. Yeah. Let me rope it back in.
Let me just pull back. Okay, the birth story. Right. Anyway, so I had to get out of the water, and then I ended up having this monitor on my belly, and then they're like, okay, we're going to put you on your back. And the one thing, like, and I kind of kick myself now and think, like, probably the most important thing is your birth position. And that was one thing that I kind of had everything else about, like baby and health of baby and this and that. But actually the birthing position, I probably didn't do enough reading around.
Right.
And so they were like, okay, we'll put you on the bed. And from what I've now understood, it's a lot easier for a midwife to deliver a baby on a bed. It's much safer, easier for them to handle the baby, as opposed to like standing up or all fours or this and that, just from a safety perspective. So they would generally 9 times out of 10 encourage women to birth on their back. But
oh my gosh, I've always wondered, because on your back it's the worst position for the woman.
Yeah, and it's literally, I read a stat that it will decrease your pelvic inlet by 30%. And so that was my one big regret after having Charlie. So I tore quite badly. I had 2 second-degree tears, a clitoral tear and a perineal tear. And so had I have maybe had a different birthing position, I know like you're more likely to tear with first baby. I don't know whether that's a proven research thing or whether it's the lack of preparation or birthing positions. I don't know what that actually comes back to. So I kind of had that experience, and that was
if we have like less than 1% having home births or educated births, it really makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Yeah,
because they're like, get on your back, and like,
yeah,
it's the worst position. Like, that is not natural.
100%. Yeah, and so I remember literally having like a midwife on either one of my legs, and I'm like pushing against resistance. And then little did I know that your body has a fetal ejection reflex, where it literally, you could be unconscious and but like body will still be able to push out a baby. Like, that's how amazing this innate wisdom is within us. Like, how amazing is that? Like, you could literally be, the mother can be unconscious, but your body will still start contract, like the womb and the uterus will still keep contracting, and it will literally push the baby out.
Are
like,
you kidding me?
Have that.
I'm like pulling myself back into my body right now. Like, are you?
Like, we actually have that ability.
Wow.
And so that's the other thing, is like being on your back, there's a lot of coach pushing and things like that. And like, I remember, I don't think he was quite ready, and obviously the position probably wasn't the best, but I remember being like, and I'm like, okay, push, and I'm like pushing, and then no wonder why I tore, and you know, it wasn't the best outcome for me in that sense. But it was just like a really interesting thing, and I've heard a lot more women speak up about that too, and how they've been sort of pushed into that. So one part of me, and I don't live my life in regret, but I would wish that I could have perhaps done a more dynamic birth position, whether it would be all fours or standing or what have you,
and just on your body as well, you know. And for him, because the energy of your actual birth can carry out and have to be shifted in your energy. So of course 100%. You've got that. I know what you mean. It's not like a regret, but it's like I wish I was a little more educated on that. Yeah,
100%. And that's the thing, is it's like it was a great lesson, and I took that when I went to go have my second birth. So that was like one of my 4 things. I was like, birth position, like that's what I need to work on.
Can I ask, for Charlie's birth, did you have a doula? Or
no, so I actually, the hospital had like a student midwife program, and so they asked me like, oh, do you want to pop your little head out? Sorry, that was Daisy's head coming out of her little carrier. That probably sounded really strange. Kind of have to see it to see what I'm talking about. So the hospital offered a student midwife program, so you could choose to have a midwife, which would then help them in their training for they're still obviously completing their studies, but I think they're like in their 4th year or something. So it's just to get them the practical experience. And having that meant that if you were birthing in a public system, depending on when you arrived, like, you weren't going to know the midwife that could have potentially been on duty. So it would have just been like random midwives, whoever's on that shift. So the way they kind of span it was like, oh, if you have this, like, she can support you and you'll have that familiar face. So that was quite helpful. So we had, a student midwife, and she came with me to, I think, a couple of the last appointments at the hospital, and then was there for the birth. So, that was probably the only support person. But again, like, she kind of, I had my little birth plan written out. So she was, I guess, advocating for that. But I didn't have a doula, no. And I guess Jake was my support person, but he probably wasn't the one, like, the advocator. I think he still kind of left that to me to be the advocator, but he was like wonderful. Like, I couldn't ask for a better support person physically. Like, I remember, he's like rubbing my back, and I'm like, do this, squeeze me, like, all the things. Like, he was wherever he needed to be. But so I guess I'm lucky that my birth didn't end up in that cascade of intervention, given maybe not having that person to advocate for me.
When you're in that state of distress.
Yeah. So that was like Charlie's experience. And again, like coming out, I still think like how lucky I am to have had that hospital. Like it was still a positive hospital birthing experience. So that's the other thing is that, you know, with what I'm wanting to work with women now, it's not necessarily like, yes, I think there's power in free birth and home birth, but I know for some women they're not going to feel safe there. And the whole thing around birth is like, okay, where are you going to feel most safe? Where is going to be a comfortable spot for you? Okay, if it is the hospital, like how are you then going to be able to navigate this system to kind of still be in your power, trust your body when there's going to be external pressures and forces that you know your body best at the end of the day. And that's what you know, you've got to remember that. And too easily we give our power away. Like who's this doctor? Like he doesn't know your body. He's met you for 5 minutes. Like he's just like, oh yep, no,
treating everybody like it's the same body.
And it's just like, you don't know me, man. Like I'm headstrong. Like I'm gonna get this baby out.
Even your birth story with Charlie, like listening to that, and that's the first time I've heard that, it's still so empowering to know that you were in your strength. But I love, you know, we were speaking before we started recording about what you're wanting to start bringing through for women. And you know, if you feel called to speak into that now, you so can. But it's up to you. If not, stay tuned, everyone, because it's very awesome and empowering.
Well, I will speak into it a little bit. Again, it's still something that it's kind of still coming through, and I'm trying to work out what it's going to look like and how it's going to be. But essentially, it's just about the goal and the vision of this is literally like, how can I empower women to be fully in trust of their body, and like, what are the tools and things that we can weave in and the work that needs to be done in order for this to happen. The other thing which we kind of really haven't touched on yet, but how sacred and spiritual birth can be. And I guess that's where I also like, there's so many different courses about like all the physical stuff. Like, you know, it's like, okay, this position and, you know, this intervention and, you know, all the research sort of stuff. But I haven't really come across anything apart from what I had done in my own sort of self research and self practices around like how can we make that birth a spiritual practice. And it's like, it's literally like one of the biggest initiations of your life. And it's like, honestly, I've had both of my, obviously we're still always awakening and things like that, but I guess my greatest awakenings have been literally post-birth and going through that birth transition from maiden to mother. And then even when you're going second time around, like you still have that element of that maiden coming into that motherhood once again. Like it's a whole nother initiation. And just basically want to try and work in something that we can support women in that sense to encourage that spiritual connection and just to make birth that sacred. It is. It's such a sacred thing. And I think we've lost that. Like, I know when we look back at like the red tent, for instance, back in, I don't know what era that was, but
thousands of years ago, and in so many cultures as well.
And it wasn't just, you know, like I know the Aboriginal people had their own practices around the red tent and things like that, and then the Native Americans, like it's all very similar. I'm sure they were done quite differently, but
always honoring the woman's body for allowing the soul to land in this it's like the soul's coming like a helicopter into the womb, onto the landing pad, and it's your job to physically shift that soul into this physical realm. And like when you even just say that,
isn't that,
can you believe it?
Like that actually happens. Like that's what's happening. Is it's like, and as we say this, it's 11:11. Like crazy. Of course it is. Like, but and it's just like the other thing as well. I think that I really want to encourage more of is that women's wisdom and like passing that down. Like, so for me now having this experience, like the wisdom that I can pass on to my daughter, that she can then pass on to her daughter, and like to have that like sacred women's wisdom to be passed down again. Like, why did we lose that? No. Like, now it's just like, all of the work that I've been doing has been around women. Like we're coming together and circling as women. And when that happens, like that's just magic.
And you know, in this day and age, we have podcasts, we have social media, we have so many different avenues that we can take for your wisdom to be shared to like women all around the world, not just our small community. So 100%. It's so powerful. And that was such a huge reason why I was like, you need to get on my podcast, because it's like, I want your wisdom. I want to be empowered. I am empowered by you, but like, I just know how much, you know, I don't even want kids yet. And this, just hearing this, it's so empowering. Like, oh my gosh, one day I'm going to have all of this wisdom behind me.
Yeah, and that's
the ripple effect of you just sharing this story is so incredible.
Yeah, and I guess I didn't really realize the power of that until I shared my birth story on Instagram and the feedback, and I kind of just think, like, that's the other thing, is like, I'm not special, like anyone can do this, like we're all women, like you can have this experience too, like it's not like I'm some person that's up on this pedestal, like I'm literally just an average woman, like
you're just being that permission slip for other women to go
100%.
This other woman
did. And that was what kind of, I guess, empowered me as well. Like, I looked at other people's birth stories and watched, like, Jake used to catch me in my bed when I was pregnant watching, he'd hear like these moanings, like, and he's like, are you watching another birth, like, story or a birth video? And I'm like, no. It would be like I just loved it, and I would just love, like, seeing how beautiful birth can be. Like, it doesn't have to be this, emergency situation, this traumatic thing. Like, it can be so beautiful and blissful, and like when you just let your body do its thing.
I have seen the most like beautiful birth experiences of women, like even standing and pulling their baby and holding them, like they're the first one to hold their baby. Yeah,
and that was what I really wanted with Daisy as well when I was kind of working into how I wanted my second birth to go. It's like, that is just magical to be able to just like be that first connection that soul has, and you lock eyes, and it's like, you just can't even describe it. And then like the amount of ecstasy and oxytocin and bliss, it's just like, it's undescribable until you've been through that. Like, it's
So what was it that really made you go, like with Daisy, did you plan Daisy?
Yeah, so we were actually trying for Daisy. So with Charlie, like, he was an accident.
Yeah.
not me, maybe.
Not planned.
Yeah.
Not planned.
Just not planned. That's probably a better choice of words. But you know what? He's 6. He's thriving. I love him. Wouldn't change it for the world. And so that was literally like a one-hit wonder. Like, I'm like, okay, I must be so fertile. Like, this is babies. So I basically got to the point where I knew, like, because I was so young and I'd still,
How old were you when you had Charlie?
23.
Yeah.
My age. 22 or, 22, turning 23 when I had him. And, so I kind of, like, had just got my first job out of uni, was just about to go full-time, and then I had baby. Yeah. And so it was kind of like this whole, shift of, like, okay, I just need a bit of time to kind of actually grow up a little bit and kind of settle in. So, we did have quite the gap. But it got to about, Charlie was, I think, maybe just after he turned 5. And Jake and I were talking, and we're kind of like, I think we could have another baby. Like, we're in a more different position. We've both done a lot of growth along the way, and we're ready. And so me being like, well, Charlie was just like a one-hit wonder. I'm like, right, we're going to try this month. We're going to be pregnant. It's going to be like, great. Like, this great. And then it come back to this whole theme and lessons of, like, you can't control life. So it took us about, I think, 11, maybe 12, like nearly a whole year to conceive Daisy. So and even just the heartache of that, like, I deeply knew that it would come when it was ready, but to actually fully surrender to that process was it was a really interesting period of growth, and just the emotional roller coaster that you go on, and
having that control taken from you and being a stubborn person, as you've spoken into, that doesn't go very nicely.
No. And so me being like, like, why isn't this baby coming? Like, I literally should be pregnant right now. Like, I'm healthy. I do all the right things.
And isn't that such a limiting belief? I do all the right things.
100%. And it's just like, and I'm so grateful that we had that time and that growth in that space of trying for that year. But it would literally just be an emotional roller coaster. Like, every month it would be like, okay, I'm going to take a test. Like, it's a couple of days before my period. Like, get excited. Oh, it's negative. Oh, there's my period. And I'd kind of be really deflated every time I would, like, get that cycle, which is,
of course,
not the, we still need to honor our cycles and be so grateful for that. But I was, like, literally being like, my period. Oh, that means we're not pregnant. Oh, like, it was this whole, like, real bummed out kind of vibe.
Instead of honouring your body for where she was, you were like, you're not giving me what I fucking want.
Yeah, and so I definitely fell into that spiral, and I can understand why it did take maybe 12 months to kind of allow her to come. And then they say, like, the moment you stop trying, like, it happens.
Yeah, it's because you take that pressure away as well. Yeah,
and like, so that was really interesting going through that journey. And then we finally did fall pregnant just before Christmas in my years of, like, all messed up into one. I think it was 2021.
Yep.
So Christmas 2021, I remember, like, wrapping up the little pregnancy test for Jake and being like, we're pregnant. pregnant. Like, how exciting.
Oh, that's so cute.
And then must have been, like a week later, then we miscarried. So it was kind of like this whole emotional thing. Like, it was around that Christmas holiday period. So I just kind of went into this, like, hibernation. And it was, even though it was really early on, like, and I kind of just wish I didn't find out about it, because that kind of was a real kick in the gut. So it was like, but then I had this other side of me, like, I still always had this deep knowing. I was like, well, that soul just, it wasn't meant to be, like, it wasn't the time. Like, I did still have this deep connection. Like, the years went on from, obviously, Charlie's birth to that, and obviously I went through a big spiritual period of growth too. So I still always had that deep inner trust.
Yeah.
And, you know, obviously it's shit to, like, work through that and the grief and the things associated with that. So, yeah, that can be really challenging to navigate that period. And I guess that was where I kind of fell back onto a lot of my healing practices. And I think I actually did a session with Nat, must have been in like January or February, where we just did a shamanic breathwork cacao ceremony, like in a group setting. But I had a massive shift and release there.
Isn't it interesting though how you just said that you had the miscarriage and the grief?
Yeah.
So you fell back on the healing things that were within.
Yes. Yeah.
So it was almost like that soul had to come through for you to then see the magic in yourself. I have it all here.
Yeah. 100%.
Instead of outsourcing.
Yeah.
I can't fall pregnant because of this, what I'm eating, this, what I'm doing, this.
Yeah.
No, it's all within you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Which was a real game changer. And so I think after that, so I did that cacao ceremony, and that was, you know, I shifted a lot of stuff around that. And then, so that must have been in January or February. And then I think I also because I did my Reiki. That's right. I did my Reiki with Nat. That must have been my master's of Reiki. And then we had a cacao ceremony that night. And so that was just a massive, like, whole big shift of energy that weekend.
Anything with Nat. Just like...
Yeah. So that was amazing. So thanks, Nat, for that. And then, I kind of was like ready. So I was doing acupuncture as well, just to help regulate my cycle a little bit. And I was kind of at that point, must have been, 2 and a bit months on, and I was like, okay, look, I'll just start acupuncture. May as well. I know how long this can take. Like, we'll just start getting my body back into the swing of it. So I started acupuncture again, and then we went, that's right, I ended up getting COVID, and I remember, like, I got COVID, and then I got my bleed, and it was, like, the most intense bleed I'd
Mine was
ever
too
had.
after I had it.
I literally got COVID on the Sunday, and then I think the Monday I got my bleed, and, like, the 2, and it was just, like, it was not a fun time. But, so I'd kind of just been like, oh, I've given up hope. Like, I was like, I'm not going to fall pregnant this month. Like, I don't even remember actually having sex with Jake to even try that month. And then, so when I was doing my acupuncture appointments, I think I was doing, like, weekly ones, and we were just trying to regulate the cycle. And she was like, where are you at with your cycle? And I remember I had this appointment that I was like, oh, I should probably just test. Like, I think my period's meant to be here, but I don't know. And then I know, like, with certain acupuncture points, they either, like, if it's to bring on your period, like, if you know you're not pregnant, there's, like, a different pressure point that they can do. But if you are pregnant, I don't think it's advised that they use that. So I was like, oh, I better just take a test and just, like, make sure that I'm not pregnant. And then I remember literally, I was, like, in a hurry because it was an afternoon appointment, just got home from work, like, dumped my stuff. I'm like, oh, okay, quickly just pee on a stick, like, do that. And then it was positive, and I was like, oh, fuck, I wasn't ready for this. And I was like, is that really? And I'm like, oh, that can't be right. And so I, like, take another test, and I'm like, and then Jake had this whole thing around, like, whenever I took a test and, like, how I was going to tell him, like, that was really important for him. But so the first, like, when I did that thing and I wrapped the Christmas present up as the test, and that was, like, he thought that was the greatest thing in the world. And he's like, that's the best gift you could have ever given me. And it was amazing. But then this time around, I literally just was like, I think I'm pregnant. Bye. Gotta go acupuncture. And he was like, what? And I'm like, yeah. Well, I'm pretty sure it's positive. And then I was kind of still in this, like, real kind of masculine thing that I didn't want to get excited, having had the miscarriage, that I was kind of in this state of, like, well, it's really early days, like, we'll just wait and see what happens. But, like, I just kind of had no attachment to it either. So I guess that's the other beauty, is, like, as soon as you surrender, like, one, I was like, I've got COVID, it's not going to happen this cycle. I don't even remember if we even had sex. Obviously we did, because you know,
you kind of had to
have. So something happened along the way, and so it was this whole really interesting time, and I was like, okay. And then I remember going into the acupuncture appointment, and she was like, so where are you at with this cycle? And I was like, well, I think I'm pregnant. And she was like, oh, okay, well, tell me about that. And I was like, yeah, I literally just took a test, like, just a couple of minutes ago before I get here. And she's like, okay, well, all right, well, we'll just, try and support for pregnancy. And I was like, okay. And then
thinking, like, what the fuck?
So I'm just in this whole, like, oh my God, this is what I've always wanted. Like, I've been wanting for so long, and now it's here. And, like, I couldn't get excited, which was the other really challenging thing. So obviously that pregnancy stayed, which was amazing, but I found it really hard to connect with Daisy because a part of me was scared to go through that grief again of having that loss and knowing that I wanted it so bad that I knew that I couldn't get too attached, because then if it did get taken away from me, it was going to be that much harder to move through that.
Almost trust that you'd be able to get through that.
Yeah. So it was this really awkward thing of like, I didn't want to tell anyone that I was pregnant because I was like, oh, well, what happens if I do miscarry? And I was like, well, it's good to have that because then you've got that support and that network.
Did you wait a while to announce it?
To announce it, like, yes, but for my family and stuff, I think I was about 8 weeks, which initially I just wanted to tell my mum, and then it happened that it was, I think, what was that? It must have been, so it was the Mother's Day weekend, and we were having this big, it was my birthday as well. My birthday is always close to Mother's Day. And we were having a little family barbecue at my mum's place. And so I got there early and I bought my mum like a Mother's Day present that was like a little onesie being like, you're going to be a grandma again or something like that. And so I was like, we got there a bit early, but then so did everybody else. And I remember being like, hey mum, just come to the room for a second. I just want to show you something. And then so I like gave her a little present and she opened it. She was like, oh, okay. And then she was just like, got so excited. Then everyone just started arriving.
Yeah.
So then like, she was like, Emma's going to have a baby. And I was like, oh, I didn't really want to tell everyone, Mum, but you have now. So surprise. Because I was still so early and I was kind of like, yeah.
But what a test even from, you know, your angels of like, you're trying to keep this hidden because of your own.
It was just fear. Yeah.
Your own fear. So let's put you in this situation where you have no control again.
And it's like surprise announcement. So then like all my family are like, come over, like, congratulations, oh how excited. And I'm like, and I just was like, thanks, I'm so overwhelmed right now, and this wasn't how I
and it would have made it feel more real.
It really did. But I was kind of like, oh, and then I was like, I didn't want to, okay, it's happened, like I can't do anything about it. So that was that journey. And then like obviously as the pregnancy progressed, like I was obviously starting to be like, okay, you know, you get to a certain point and you can like see your bump grow and you're like, okay, there's definitely a baby in here, it's healthy from what I think, it's growing, like, you know. So then you were able to get attached a little bit more. But one thing that was really interesting, and even still I could not, like I do my daily meditation, like that was one thing that was really strong throughout my entire pregnancy. That was my non-negotiable, was like my morning meditations, but I'd always ask for connection and to connect with her spirit, but there was this block, like it was just something that I was never able to. It was so strange. But before that, I had connected with her spirit, and I knew that like this is why she's called Daisy. I was in a meditation maybe like 2 years before that, and I knew that there was still 2 spirit babies out there for me. Yeah. And they'd come through really strong, and it was like, there was going to be a boy and a girl, and one had come through and it was like, they showed me a Daisy, and it's like, I want to be called Daisy. And I was like, okay, it's a girl, you're Daisy. And then the other one was going to be, they showed me the malachite crystal, and it was going to be Malachi. And so I was like, okay, there's 2 babies. And this was like 2 years. So this was even before we were kind of actually actively wanting to conceive again. So I kind of knew that they were there. And that was the other thing, I guess it comes back to that deep knowing and deep trust that I knew that eventually one day it would happen. Yeah. And so that was a little detraction. That's why Daisy is Daisy. But I could go on. There's like a whole other thing with that. I was working at a gym, and the club manager, like we were quite good friends. She literally just came up one day and she was like, hey, I had this dream on the weekend that you were pregnant. So this is must have been January last year in 2022. She's like, I had this dream, like you and Jake were pregnant with another baby. It was a girl. And doesn't Daisy mean anything to you? And I was just like, are you fucking serious? I was like, that's literally what my spirit baby wants to be called. And she was just like, no, get out.
What the hell?
So this is in January. So this was before she was even like a thing. And so we were kind of just joked about it, and we're like, oh, well, we'll see what happens. And then anyways, I finally announced that I was like pregnant to like work and everything. And they were like, she was like, oh my God, you're going to have a girl. It's going to be called Daisy. And I was like, well, maybe. And then I had this whole thing that I thought she was a boy. And like the whole pregnancy, I was like, nah, she's a boy. And I just couldn't attach to that.
Oh, that's right. You didn't know.
No, so we didn't know.
Right.
Yeah. And I was like, she's going to be a boy. And then it wasn't literally until like the couple of days before she was born that this George Ezra song came on, Hold My Girl. It was just like literally whenever my phone would come on like Spotify at random shuffle, it would just play all the time. And I was like, and I was like jamming along to, I'm like, Hold My Girl. And I was in like my little birth labor playlist thing. And I was like, yeah, and I'm like, Hold My Girl. I'm like, yeah. And I was like calling her a girl, and I was like, this is weird. Like, I think, and I'm like, no, it's a girl. And it was like this whole, like, it finally had dropped in. I could finally connect to that.
I forgot you didn't even know. I feel like I just always thought you were having a girl.
Yeah, no. So that was, another little
Did you have planned, you know, before conceiving, you wanted to do the free birth at home?
I knew that, like, after going through the COVID period, and like I had seen that there was a lot of different things with hospitals that, like, some partners weren't allowed to be in birthing suites, and like there was this whole thing, like, you know, you couldn't have support people come, you could only have one. Like, I think it was constantly changing throughout the times of COVID, and I was like, that is not an environment that I want to bring a child into this world.
Like the non-secure, unstable, uncertainty kind of thing.
Yeah, and even just, like, I guess coming from that too, like, I'd also had this whole other thing around, like, I knew the system is, well, to me, the system is broken, and that wasn't something that aligned with my beliefs. And I guess the only other alternative was, I was like, okay, well, home birth.
Yeah.
And so at the time we were living in a 2-bedroom unit, and I was like, well, I could totally have a baby here. Like, surely the whole resort won't mind if they hear me screaming and birthing. Anyways, ended up moving houses.
You moved like the week before, was it?
2 weeks before, which again was very divinely guided and amazing. But so coming back to whether it was going to be your home birth or free birth, and then so I was starting to look into, like, okay, well, I'll do a home birth. And then in Australia, if you want to do a home birth supported by a midwife, like, it's really expensive. Like,
isn't it like thousands of
dollars?
Yeah.
So I'm pretty sure, like, I was talking to one of my girlfriends, and like some women can pay up to like nearly 10 grand for like everything. And I was just like, I knew the experience that I had in the hospital, that like the midwives were obviously like there, but they didn't actually do much for me. Like, do you know what I mean? So I kind of was like, do I actually need this? Like, and then when you do that for their insurances and stuff, you don't just have one midwife, you have to have the second one come as well, which then is an added extra cost. And
I was looking and just like to see what and it was like there was two for the one company. It was like $12,000 or something. I'm thinking, okay, I'm having a doula.
And so I guess that was kind of one thing where I was kind of like, look, can I justify, like, that's a lot of money. Could I justify that? And it was interesting because then it played up.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
You're right.
Just stop talking.
That's
another, you know, conditioning of them wanting you to use the hospital.
Yes,
and not have
100%.
Control of your body.
And so then I went through this whole other thing around, like, okay, is this actually a money block and belief? Like, do I not think that I'm valuing myself enough that I can't invest that money, or that, you know, that's not an option for me? Or is it like the fact that what it ended up coming back to was like, no, I think I've got this. It was kind of just like, I don't need that. Like, so I did a lot of work around that, because it was like, is this conditioning? Is this, like, I don't even know what this is. So
like, what the fuck is this?
And then so I kind of was like, okay, well, maybe I'll look into a doula. And then so I just like put up in this Facebook group being like, can anyone recommend a doula? And then a couple of these women had recommended this doula, and so I like looked her up, and her name was Rosie. Hey Rosie, if you listen. And so I was like looking into, and then I clicked into her like website, and was kind of just like, you know, as you research, you suss your people out. And I was like, I saw her, like, she had on her little website her blog of her birth stories, so I like read her birth stories, and I was like, she's my girl. Like, she's had, I think, 2 free, like, I think all of hers were home births, 2 were midwives, and then 2 were free births. I don't know, probably I may have got that wrong, can't really remember off the top of my head. Anyway, sorry Rosie if that's not correct, but I know she's definitely had a couple of free births. And so I was like, like, she's gone through it herself, like she knows how to support a woman who's going through that. And I was like, she's my gal. So I reached out to her, and she was like, yep, I'm available, like, we can make that happen, and I'm totally happy to support free birth. And I was like, amazing. So then I was kind of like, yep, I'm having free birth. And then I was kind of like, I didn't really have much care as well, like with a GP or anything either. I did have one scan when we were 11 and a half weeks, only because I thought I could have been having twins. Okay. So I was kind of just wanting to check that it wasn't twins, so I didn't have another surprise. So I had that, and then I found this really beautiful doctor, and because I knew, like, when you free birth in Australia, it can kind of be a bit of a tricky thing to, like, register your child, because you're not part of the system, even when it comes back to, like, birth registration. And so I sort of read up about, like, I needed to just see a doctor just to have it on record that I was pregnant, that in fact, like, I did carry that child, that I'm not, I didn't just find this child from somewhere. So, I did do that. And then, I had this really beautiful doctor who was really supportive, and she was like, oh, that's amazing. Like, you know, you're free birthing. Wonderful. So that's the other thing, like, when you're looking at the free birth route, just even from having that in terms of, like, a birth registration and stuff, it still is important to kind of have that GP checkup, and just making sure, like, obviously general health and wellness, like, was fine, and I was healthy and well, and I knew I was a low risk pregnancy.
Beautiful.
So then I was kind of like confident going in with that I was like, well, I don't have any risk factors, or, you know, nothing is going to stop me from doing this.
Isn't, like, as soon as you surrendered,
Yeah.
and then nothing can stop you.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
And that's the sacred feminine.
Yeah,
Like
100%. So, yeah, it was a really interesting time sort of coming to terms with, like, okay, I'm having a free birth. And then the next part was like, okay, how can I tell Jake, like, what a doula is, that she's not medically trained, and that, like, he was always going to support me with my choice no matter what. Like, that was always, like, he's like, I don't care what you do. Like, you've got my 100% support. He's like, but I just don't, like, Zach, I don't know whether I feel safe with, like, not having that. And I was kind of explaining. And then, you know, the more educated that he got around the idea, he was kind of like, yep, I'm on board. He even did this, like, men's retreat to do some, like, of his own inner work and healing and how to support a woman in birth, which was amazing. So that was really helpful to get him, like, fully on board with it. And then, yeah, like, the pregnancy was going really well. Everyone was just like, oh, are you pregnant? Like, I didn't even know, like, you're hiding it so well. Yeah. I guess being tall, like, it was, I can hide my pregnancies for quite some time. I think I didn't tell work or my clients until I was 20 weeks pregnant. And I was like, they're like, oh, so you must be like 10, 12 weeks. And I was like, 20. And they're like, what? I'm like, halfway. I'm like, yeah. So I'm very blessed that I carry well in pregnancy and can still do all the things. And
did you find having a doula throughout, like, how does that work? Did you have sessions with her leading up to the birth?
Yeah, so we'd met a few times leading into the birth and just talking about, like, my wants, my wishes, like, how she could support me to achieve those.
Building connection, really.
Yeah, essentially, yeah. So it's just, like, she obviously understood, like, you know, coming into a birth, like, to have that familiar face, to be safe when I'm birthing, that it's safe for me to do so, and that sort of thing with her. So we had a couple of meetups prior to, and then the couple of weeks before, she, like, came and she, like, got the birth pool organized, and then we'll drop that off, and then, like, met Jake for the first time. So then Jake was, like, familiar, and, you know, any questions that he had. So that was really beautiful to have that connection time. And then basically it's kind of like, if I needed her, like, I could text her, whatever. But I guess being second pregnancy, I kind of knew a few you know, bits and pieces. And then so then it wasn't until, like, show day that we really got involved.
Let's hear about that. You've posted it on your Instagram, and, like, so I know bits of it. And some parts of it I just think, oh my gosh, lady, like, you went to Woolworths, like, you need to get into this. Okay, so basically I had also had this thing, like, as we sort of mentioned before, I was in a 2-bedroom beach unit, and I was kind of like, at this point, like, where am I going to have this baby? Is it going to be here? Is it going to be in this? We knew we were going to have this other house. We just didn't know if it was going to work in time, like, if she came early or whatever it was going to be. She ended up coming right on time. So we moved into a bigger house, and it actually had this beautiful space that I could set up for my birth space, and that was amazing. So anyways, fast forward, I'd had my birth space all planned and all ready. This was maybe like a week before. Like, we literally moved on the 10th of December, and then sort of had those couple of days to unpack, get settled, crazy nesting, like, run myself ragged trying to get that house set up and sorted. And then I set up my birth space, and her due date was meant to be the 21st of December. So I'd sort of set that up, and I was kind of like, oh, second baby, I'll probably go early, like, you know, this is what I hear. And with Charlie, I went the day before his due date, so I'm like, oh, if anything's to track record, and that was my biggest learning. No two pregnancies are ever going to be the same. And I was always like, you know, from my experience with Charlie, and it was like, there were two totally different pregnancies trying to have the control.
100%. And I'm like, so she's probably going to come around, like, the 20th, you know, I'd like you to come before Christmas, that would also be great. You know, just putting these things
your morning meditation.
So, like, if you could come now, like, that'd be really great. And so then there was this time, like, so it sort of got to the point of her due date, like, nothing was happening, and I was kind of like, it's almost like you kind of make yourself kind of, like, feel like you're in labor, but it's not. Like, it's like you were wanting it to make it happen. It's like, I'm like, oh, I feel a cramp. Oh, this is labor. Oh,
like, and when we want to have, like, a day off work, you know, when we're not working something that a job we love, and we're like, oh, I have a headache. Oh, fuck, I actually have a headache.
Exactly like that. So I feel like that played out, like, for that whole week, like, after it hit her due date, and then it was coming into Christmas, and I feel like I was like, I'm totally going to have, and I remember waking up and be like, it's a great day to have a baby. And so she was just like, you know, just testing out my patience. And then, because it was this awkward time around Christmas and stuff, and everyone's like, so what are you going to do for Christmas? And I was like, well, it just depends on if I have a baby, if I don't have a baby. And then it kind of got to the 24th, and we were having a big family Christmas Eve. And they're like, so you're going to come? And I was like, well, I've still got a baby in my belly, so I guess. Like, sure. And then we had this joke that I was going to have, like, my birth around my whole family. And it was, you know, at my cousin's place, and everyone was going to freak out. And my cousin's a nurse, and she's like, yeah, I'll deliver your baby. And she even had a dream that happened. And I was like, that is not happening. Like, this is not the environment. Like, because I love my family, but some of them are real stress heads and, like, you know, real worrywarts. And I was like, that's not the environment that I want to have my baby. So then I was kind of had that in the back of my mind. I was like, do I really want to go to this Christmas thing? Like, oh, you know, I don't know. Anyway, so we went through the whole Christmas period. That was great. Like, got all that out of the way. And it was really nice for Charlie to kind of have that, like, little closure period of having us all to himself, still, like, having that Christmas where it was like, had we have had her the days before Christmas, probably wouldn't have really happened. We would have just been at home. It would have just been real, like, boring for him, I guess, as a 6-year-old, which Christmas shouldn't be. So yeah, I was grateful that she actually decided to come after. And then, yeah, so we got through the Christmas period, and then it was on the 27th of December, and I was just kind of, life just kind of went on. It was just like, oh, well, we'll just keep plodding along with life and just wait for this baby to come. And we went to the IGA, and then I got home and I stepped up out of the car, and, like, that transition from, like, standing up, and I was like, my waters broke, but I was like, did I just pee myself? Like, I don't know what just happened. And then so I was like, Jake, I think my water's broke. And I was like getting all excited. But then at the same time, I didn't want to get too excited because I knew with Charlie, like, things didn't really start for a few hours. It's kind of like, okay, well, that happened. And then I remember messaging my mum being like, hey, just letting you know my waters are broken. And she was like, oh my God, you're going to have a baby. Like, I'm going to be there right away. And I was like, I was going to just say, maybe just take your time. Yeah. Like, she got so excited. And I had this little group from my mother's blessing that if anything was going to happen with labour, like, we had this little ritual that we were all going to light candles to support that, so I could draw on their strength and everything during the birth. And so my mum was like, light your candles, ladies, and, like, got so excited. And I was like, Mum, nothing's happening. Like, I'm literally just, my waters are broken, but nothing's happening. So, like, you know, you probably jumped the gun a bit.
The candles are going to melt by the time I'm in
so then I was like, okay, sorry, Mum, but, like, I'll just update the chat. Like, you just maybe don't go in the chat again. It's like, I love you and I know you're excited, but let's just maybe just keep that on the download. And then, so I was like, maybe that night I'm going to wake up and labour's going to happen. My mum stayed there and, like, nothing happened. I had, like, a nice night's sleep, woke up at 1 a.m. being like, it's 1 a.m, nothing's happening. So I'm like, may as well have some toast, like, go back to bed. And then that next day, like, even still woke up, was like, nothing's happening. Still just, like, my waters are slowly leaking out. And I was like, okay, what do I do? And just be patient. Do I wait? Like, what do I do? And then...
Gosh, she tested your patience.
She did. Different... And then, so that was literally a full 24 hours. And then, I don't know why, but I decided to go to Woolworths with Mum. And we're like, let's get some stuff for dinner. And so... I'm still wearing, like, one of those jumbo maternity pads to try and capture the waters that are leaking still. And I'm just cruising around Woolies, and then all of a sudden I kind of, like, got these, like, cramps. I was like, oh, that's, you know, feeling something. But I just couldn't get excited because I was like, oh, it's probably just a false. And I was, like, in this real, like, it was not really like me, but I kind of went in this real, like, down in the dumps kind of like, oh, I just give up. Like, I just give up on anything happening. Like, I just don't even care anymore.
Like a day. Like,
But it was kind of like that moment you surrender. Like, that's when it happens. And then, so I'm in Woolworths, and then I was like, oh, that's a contraction. I'm like, and Mum's like, are you okay? And I was like, I think I just had a contraction. She's like, what? She's like, not here. No. I was like, okay, well, let's just hurry up. Let's just get out of here. And then Mum's like, all right. And then I remember going, so, Nambour is really not the nicest place on the Sunshine Coast. And I remember going to the toilet. My mum was like, don't you dare have a baby in those toilets. And I was like, try my best, Mum, like, but I do have to wee. So
oh my God.
Went to the toilet, then we finally got back into the car, got home, and then, like, contractions were kind of just, like, slowly coming on, but it was still pretty slow, and I was just plodding around. So this is about, like, 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and I'd get a couple of contractions, and I just sort of, like, just breathe and talk, and I'm still, Mum's like, are you even in labour? Like, what's happening? And I'm like, I don't know, Mum, let's just go with it, right? And then, I remember, like, pacing up and down my stairs, being like, I'm going to get this baby out. Like, stairs, like, apparently helps bring baby lower down, and so I'm doing that, and then I, like, did these weird inversions on my bed, like, upside down, like, I don't even know. Apparently that was meant to, like, bring baby down.
Anything
that I was like, okay, this is happening. So that was, around, like, 5 until about 7 o'clock, and then my mum was, like, cooking dinner, and then she I was in the lounge room and I was on like the like exercise ball thing, just kind of cruising through a contraction. And at this point, like I could still talk, like it was sort of each contraction that came, I'd sort of just have to be like, just ride the wave. I could still kind of be like present, like, you know, what was going on around. But then my mum turned on the light in the lounge room and then it just triggered the fuck out of me. I was like, oh, I can't deal with this anymore. I was like, I need space. Like they say, like in birth, you kind of hit this point of like nearly active labor where you kind of go really internalized and you can't like hold conversations. You can't like, the outside world doesn't exist. You just go within. And so I hit that point. I was like, right, I got to go up into my birth room. So I went up into my birth room, was just kind of cruising by myself. And then I remember I was kind of messaging the doula along the way and being like, because I told her like she kind of knew things were obviously going to happen eventually because I'm like, waters are broken, nothing's happened. And then I messaged her and like had a couple of contractions in Woolworths, you know, nothing consistent. And then I got to the point where like, I think the last message I'd sent, like I kind of really downplayed where I was at. And then like things started to like amp up and I was like, Jake, call the doula. Like I physically can't text her and I don't know how to communicate. And I was like, just call her, tell her it's happening. So I was kind of in this like, I went to that internal point and she was like, coming straight away. So she got there at like 8 o'clock and then things were like pretty intense. Like I'm writing these contractions, like got to the point where I'm like it stopped me in my tracks, like really having to breathe and like focus through each one. And then, she got there and just like straight away just jumped in and was just like giving me some counter back pressure, which was like amazing. She does the best, like basically I was on all fours and she was like on my back, kind of just like, it's almost like she's kind of like pulling your hips open and like just giving this counter pressure, but it just like helps you move through that contraction so much easier. So that was amazing. So each contraction she'd be like there. And then meantime, like Jake's trying to get the birth pool sorted out, which is like,
didn't he run out of hot water? You ran out of hot water?
Yep, that happened. So I'm thinking I'm going to have my dream water birth and Jake's in and out of the room trying to get the birth pool sorted, but like things are starting to heat up a bit. And then he's like, the water's not working. I was like, what do you mean the water's not working? He's like, there's no hot water. And I was like, well, make it hot. Like, I don't care what you have to do. Like, get this happening. So then Rosie was like, just start getting saucepans on the stove to heat it up. Like, and then so my mum and Jake are like frantically just like trying to get hot water things into the pool. And they managed to raise the temperature a little bit, but it was still pretty cold. And Daisy was coming pretty quick. And
something about you and not getting a water bath.
I know. I'm like, these babies just want to be land-born. So maybe if I ever have another one, maybe I will get my water bath.
Yeah.
And anyway, so it got to the point where like Jake was kind of in and out. Like if he'd see me with a contraction, he'd kind of stop. He'd like be there. But I was kind of got to the point where it's like, Jake, just forget about the pool. Like I just need you here. Like just be here with me. And then, like there was a couple of really intense contractions that, you know, I really just needed that extra support. And then I like looked at him in the eyes, like things just got so intense and it was just happening so quick this time that I was like, I just can't do it. You get to this point, like I think every woman in birth experiences, you get to this point of like, you just fully surrender. You're like, I can't do it anymore. You're like, if I was in a hospital, I'd be like, just take it out of me, but not really. Like, I'm like, just cut it out of me. Like, I don't care anymore. Like, I'm done. And so I got to this point and I was like, I can't do it, Jake. It's just too much. And he was just like, he literally just looked me dead in the eye and he was just like, this is what you told me would happen. And you would say this. And he's like, you just need to call on the strength of your sisters and like, you know, all the wisdom of them and it'll happen. And then, so I was like, okay, got this. And then, so I really like drew on their strength and kind of just reminded myself like, I'm supported. I've got this. And then, that must have been literally 10 minutes before she kind of was like crowning. And it was just like this, I kind of went from this like, it's almost like I had this out of body experience. Like your soul, and they do say like in a lot of indigenous traditions, they say your soul actually leaves your body and you kind of become like a remote viewing of yourself. Like,
I have heard that.
And so I really felt like after that, like hitting that point of transition that it was like full happening, that like I just kind of released all control of my body. Like it was this really interesting thing of like my body just moved however it moved. Like I just kind of fully surrendered. Like I was howling, I was like just full wild woman came on, like so primal. I'm on all fours and like the sounds, the deep moans, like went from deep moans and then as she was crowning it like went to this like wild roar. Like I was listening,
natural like that is so natural.
It was just so, and that's what I loved about this birth. It was just so primal and like I couldn't have like even in the war, like I don't know, like it was a blessing in the fact that I guess had I have got into the birth pool and maybe had that have been ready, I think that might have slowed things down, and it would have had to like help me find my groove again and sort of settle into that. Whereas like she was just coming, like there was no stopping this, and I don't think I could have even got to the point of even getting from all fours into the pool at that point. I basically was stuck on all fours for that 2-hour period.
Did you birth her on all fours?
Yeah. So literally, as I said, like Jake sort of we locked eyes and he was like, yep, just call on the strength of your sisters. That was about 10 minutes before she actually crowned, and then rode through.
You literally just had to call on the strength of your sisters.
Yep. And then so like rode through those last couple of really intense contractions. And then I'm like, shit, I can feel it. And like, I'm looking at, I remember it because it all just happened so fast. And I'm like, surely this is like, I've got ages. Like, you know, this can't be happening this quick. And then I was like, I can feel her like coming down like the birth canal. I'm like, I feel her head. And I was like, I don't want to get my hopes up. And then I remember being like, asking Rosie, I'm like, am I close? And she's like, you're just doing great. And I was like, tell me. Because she's like, I would never tell a woman like, I don't want them to kind of be out of their body or like tell them, yes, they're close if they're not, or, you know, whatever, which is, she's such an amazing doula.
Though, because that's not taking away from anything you're feeling.
Yeah, 100%. Like, even though she's, like, pretty certain she can, like, see the head coming down, she's like, you're just doing great. Like, just keep going. You're doing great. And at the time, I was kind of just, like, sacredly, like, raging. And then
but also I mean, the power behind your sacred rage, clearly.
And then also in that point, so I was like, how much longer is this going to be? Like, am I close? And then she was like, you're doing great. And I was like, can I get in the water? And she was like, it's not going to be ready. And I remember that point, I was just, like, crushed. I was like, I just wanted some relief, like, and water is so relieving in that point in time. And all I could remember was, like, I either wanted to be in the shower or just, like, water just felt like a dream. I was like, I just need this water. Like, it's not happening. And I just remember being in this, like, I've just got to just go through. You can do this. Like, just go through this. And I remember just, like, so they told me that the water's not ready. And then that's when my primal roar turned real sacred ragey. It was like, because I'm like, it was the only way to get me through. And so I just channeled all of that into that. And then literally after that, a couple of those roars, I'm like, yep, head's there. And then I could like literally feel like, okay, like you get this thing of like, it's like your body, like it's push time. And I was like, I got to do a poo. And I was like, I'm pretty sure I probably did do a poo at the same time. Like that happens.
Quite normal.
And so I'm kind of like, okay, yep, this is it. And then I reminded myself, I was like, look, I know my body can like push this baby out itself and I shouldn't have to like push it. And I'm like, okay, is this the time? But I had this strong urge and I'm like, okay, I'm just going to go with this urge. It was like, I need a push. So I kind of like pushed, and then all of a sudden like her head just like popped out. And I was like in one push, like just full crown. And then with all the research I'd done around like the birthing position and trying to slow things down and allowing myself to stretch, like to not make it happen too fast, and I was trying to slow it down. So like heads out, and then I remember be like, just, you're in this, like, it's called a ring of fire, and it's a fucking ring of fire, let me tell you.
No, trying not to empathize with this, and
let me tell you, it's it lives up to its name. And so I'm sitting in this ring of fire, and then I like reach down and I'm like on all fours, so I pull one of my hands up and I like go to like hold her head, because they say if you put like a little bit of counter pressure on the head, that can kind of just like help you open and stretch and like slow it down. So I kind of just like had my hand on her head and I was like, all right, just slowing this down.
Still on all fours, sorry.
Still on all fours, still on all fours. And I'm like, all right, just, you know, we got this. I'm just listening to my body, just trying to find like the cues. And then I was like, she's just coming out. And then all of a sudden, like, I didn't do anything. My hand's just there. And then the next contraction, she just slipped out. I was like, what just happened? Like, that was literally the fetal ejection reflex. Like, she just came out and I was kind of like, that happened so quick. And I was like, oh, that happened quicker than I thought. Maybe I'm going to tear. Had no tears, no nothing. It was amazing. And like, she literally just slips on out. So I'm on all fours.
Did you like catch her?
So yeah, like the way it kind of happened, like, so my hand was on her head and I kind of like guided her out. And like, so I was quite low to the floor at this point. And so there was like, we were on a soft mat. So I kind of guided her out to the floor and then kind of like reached through the other side and like picked her up. And I was kind of like, oh my God. And like, if you have to go on my Instagram and see the photos of like that first moment when I like see her and like it's the bliss so on my face, like I'm just so pleased. We also had a birth photographer. Best thing I could have done. Like, it was amazing to capture those moments. And I just remember being like, oh my God, like I did it. Like, I think I was just in shock. Like, one, how quickly it happened. Two, how it was just like
trying to pace yourself. She's like, I'm fucking here.
Because then like with such a slow start to labor, I was like, oh, this is going to drag. I'm like, she's just going to be one of these kids that's going to drag it out. And I'm like, oh. And so I had that in my mind, but then I was just in shock that she was like there. I was like, oh my God, I just had a baby. I was like, And I'm like,
I
yeah,
just
I was
had a
like,
baby.
I even said to Jake, I was like, we've got a baby. He was like, well, yeah, you've been pregnant for 9 months. I was like, literally just in this like state of just like wonderment and bliss. And it was like, oh my God, I got a baby. And then I was kind of like looking at her. And then, so I'm pretty sure she came out like, the other thing as well, which is a really fun fact, they say like sometimes it takes a little while for babies to like come, their soul to like come into the body when they come earthside. And so one of the things, and it's like really beautiful to watch in nature, if you watch any kind of like cow or horse or elephant or whatever, when they birth a baby, it like drops the baby to the floor, and that kind of rouses them to come into their body. And so like that happened with Daisy, like even though it's like it kind of looks like she's like dropped to the ground, but I like guided her, and she kind of like had that little bit of like, I'm in my body. And so immediately she started crying, and I was like, oh, like you just hear these little cries, but she was a little bit mucusy. So I like picked her up and I like put her on, just like, you just let intuition take over. And it was just like, picked her up, was kind of like gazing at her. By this point, like we still didn't know if it was a boy or a girl. So I'm just kind of like, you know, I've just had a baby. I'm just like, whatever it is.
And after your story of, you know, that whole pregnancy kind of not truly believing. It's like,
and so I was kind of just still in this shock. I was like, oh my God, I've got a baby. And then so I like put her on like my arm like this and kind of just like rousing her back. And then all of a sudden she just like cleared all this like mucus and fluid, which she probably didn't have time to clear in the birth canal, because when they're in the canal, it kind of like pushes all the fluids out if they've got anything on their lungs, because obviously in utero, they're like breathing in the water. Like they get the, they don't breathe as such, like their lungs haven't developed enough in that. I'm probably not making that
but like
sense.
they're in the fluid of the womb.
They get the oxygen from the placenta, and they don't actually, they're not breathing in water as such. But they still so but they still will sometimes like carry a bit of that fluid, and they've got to like get it out of their lungs, and that as they're coming down the birth canal, that can kind of like squeeze it out. But because she came out so quick, it was kind of like she still had a little bit there. So it's kind of like, okay, that's all right, she's a little bit mucusy. And then like she did like a massive clear. It was kind of like, it came out of her nose and her mouth. And then all of a sudden she was just like a screamer. And I was like, oh, that's the best sound I've ever heard. But I was sort of like, you're really loud and you're screaming.
Give me a break.
And then at this point, Jake's like, it's a boy. And I was like, oh, okay, it's a boy, cool. And then he's like, I think. And I was like, what do you mean you think? And it was like, it was, this whole weird thing. Because like we kind of was just like, you know, just had her and trying to worry about her and like just making sure she was okay. Then she was like fine, breathing, crying, doing all the great things, changed color, looks amazing. And then so kind of like, and then obviously like when you have a baby, you're like still attached like the cord, and I was kind of like trying to find a position to like actually check her out and be like, what are you? So we finally found that position. And then babies sometimes are born, like their genital areas can be a little bit swollen. And so her vulvas were like really swollen, and they kind of look like little balls.
So you were actually like, what is?
So we were kind of like, oh, it's a boy. And then I had a proper look, and I was like, Jake, it's a girl. And he's like, it's a girl. And then my mum's like, it's a girl. And everyone was like, because they knew, like Jake was like so dead set that it was a girl the whole time. He was just absolute certain. And same with my mum. My mum's like, it's a girl. And they were just both so excited. And I was kind of just like, yep, I had a girl. Like I was just, it was, and I was like, it's Daisy. And I was like, you're Daisy. And it was just special. This beautiful time. And then we called Charlie up, and then Charlie was like, I'm like, Charlie, the baby's here. And then he was just like so impressed, and like just was so cute with her, like just looking at her, and he's like, I just can't stop looking at her, Mom. She's just so beautiful.
That's like
and
the cutest thing.
I was like, yeah, she is. And then then we were trying to just like, you know, just taking her all in. And then I let her do the breast crawl, so they intuitively know how to find the breast and how to feed and like do it themselves. Like when you're in the hospital, sometimes the midwives are like put their head on, and like they don't actually have that. They have that ability to find it themselves, and they're just doing their own time.
But that's like instantly from the birth taking away your child's intuition.
Yeah, exactly. Like that's how it starts. Like it's crazy. So we just let her sort of find that, and she's a very stubborn little girl, and she was a bit of a loud screamer. Like Rosie, the doula, was like, I can't say I've ever heard a newborn scream this loudly. And I was like, oh my God, what have we done? We've got this baby. It's going to be like a mad screamer. But that was only, like, she only really gets to that point if she really wants to get what she needs out. But I haven't really heard her scream like that since.
Wow. But it was also that, like, I'm fucking here, Mum. Like, I'm here. You know, this whole time you were kind of, I can't connect. I don't truly believe this could like be real. And she's like, I'm here. Don't you go thinking it's not real.
And then, so we kind of just like tried to get the placenta out, and then I was sort of just like my knees, and like after being on all fours, I was kind of just like done. My knees were, I was like, I need to change position. I need to try and get this placenta out. And then so we'd had like a little blow up bed set up in the room next door. Because we'd literally just moved, didn't really have like anything else in there. I'm like, that'll do. And then so I remember being on the bed trying to like get her to latch, because that also helps with the placenta release. And then Rosie gave me this like little herbal tincture that helps your body release it. And then anyways, that like happened, that came out, and then it was like so cool to like look at the placenta, and like that literally nourished like life. It was
Did you get your placenta dried or?
So what I did, my doula does placenta encapsulation. So so she took it home, she encapsulated it, and then put them in capsules, and then gave them to me a day or two after. And I found like that was amazing. Like I had so much energy like postpartum, and like,
I've heard such incredible things.
I wish I had done it with Charlie. Like it was just amazing. And now I think I've got like 2 of those tablets left, and I remember like weaning myself off. Like I was having like 4 a day at one point in the early days, and I'm like, I've got so much energy.
Well, they help with like your milk and everything, don't they?
Yeah, there's like, so much different,
and it's your body.
Yeah,
again, it's like your body. It's
literally just like part of me, and I'm like so that was amazing. And so I've got 2 left, and I've been rationing them. I think I have like, I went from like 4 a day, and then for like the first 6 weeks, and then I was kind of like, all right, I'll just do like 2 a day, and then I went like 1 a day, and then I went like 1 every second day, and now I've just sort of been like drawing it out, and I think I'm down to like, I don't think I've had one now for like maybe 3 weeks, but I have one, and I'm like, and like I've got 2 left, and I'm just savoring them.
And you found that really helped post-birth in your body?
Yeah, healing, energy, like I literally...
But spiritually too, hey, because you're like connecting. So, wow.
Like even in the postpartum period, like I really this time, I literally had Charlie and was like a week later, like, let's go get out to the cafe and have coffee and like go for walks, and like did not take postpartum healing seriously. I guess I was young, and that like I was able to like bounce back quite quickly, and even, you know,
you're still so young.
Yeah, I know.
I guess I was young.
I'm literally about to turn 30, so I'm still young. I know. I feel like an old soul inside. And then with Daisy, I was kind of like, okay, postpartum, I kind of really want to nourish this time, and just like, I don't want to be overwhelmed by visitors. I just want to have like, just let us connect as a family, and just really wanted to honor that. So I literally like tried to stay in bed for like the first 2 weeks. Like obviously I'd get up and, you know, eat and that sort of thing, but really wanted to try and nourish that, and that made such a difference. And the other thing that was really interesting, like the comments of people. So I also had, Charlie was starting school, so I had to like start doing the school drop-offs when she was like maybe 4 or 5 weeks old. And I remember the comments of like all the parents being like, oh, you must be so sleep deprived. And I was like, actually, no, like I've got so much energy. And I was like, why do we put this story onto people? And I was like, literally, like, I've been woken up and stuff, but my body hormonally can cope with that. Like, I'm not struggling. I'm not sleep deprived. Like,
and you actually don't look tired. You just still look like you.
Like, and that's the thing. It was like, I think that's a story that quite often gets projected, and I'm like, it doesn't actually have to be that way. Like, people say like, you know, the newborn period is the hardest period, and I'm like, no, I fucking live with this shit. Like, I just gaze at her, and like, I'm in this meditative state looking at this baby, and like, she feeds, she sleeps, she like, I just want to cuddle her. And like, I never got to the point of like being sleep deprived. Like,
and there's so much to it, right? Like, you allowed yourself to have such a beautiful birthing experience, and I feel like that ripples into the baby. So it's like, when women
and
are
she's
having
like amazing, like she's the perfect baby.
So when
literally having her to peek
pregnancy, like like the last time I saw you was at the end of your pregnancy at a womb healing event.
Oh, that's right.
It's like, you know,
it must have been like was like 38 weeks then or something.
You were moving like a week later.
So I must have been 37 weeks. So
it's like, you really honoured your body, and that just, I feel like it makes such a difference in the baby. It's just incredible. But oh my gosh, that has just been such a beautiful episode.
Yes, thank you for having me on.
Into this, and I'm like,
so
there's
excited
so
to share
many
this.
more questions. I'm like, I still want to keep asking, but the episode will just go for so long.
We'll have to do a part 2.
Seriously. And, you know, even like a little speak into how you are feeling in a few months' time with all of this, because you still would be integrating such a deeply spiritual experience.
100%. And I feel like now, like, they literally say, like, you have that 4th trimester of like postpartum, and so we've literally just come out of that this week, and I'm kind of feel like the stars are aligning, like all my things. It's like, you're like, come on my podcast, and like now I think is like, I'm out of that point, and I've just got such clarity. Like it's just, alignment in its finest form.
And I cannot wait to see what you are going to be bringing through for women, because even though you're really feeling that anchored in that you want to help women with birth, I feel like it's still, you know, I'm not wanting babies for a few years, but it's still like so inspiring for me to be in your proximity and like hearing all this knowledge you have. And you know, you're an astrologer as well, so there's all of that aspect. And you're a cacao like lover. It's like you have all these so many tools. You do, and you've done all these different beautiful modalities, and now it's your turn to create what you want for your purpose. Like no one else, just you to bring through for women. And I can't wait to just keep on watching this blossom.
Exciting. I'm excited.
So exciting.
Yeah.
So if you want to follow Emma over on Instagram, it's peace.love.alchemy.
Yep.
Oh, got it.
Look at you go.
Look at me. So yeah, just to keep up to date, you know, she's got her birth story over there, which is like, if you might be wanting to look at the visual of this, she's got some couple of videos up. I mean, your content is just really beautiful. Always like keeping up to date with astrology and the moons and all the things that are going on. We were having this conversation before we started recording. I'm like, I just love seeing all the astrology stuff, but I just can't like hold it in my memory bank. But yeah, so go follow Emma, and I'll leave it linked below. Do you have a website?
Currently no. I'm in transition of like, because I was Peace Love Cacao and now changed to Peace Love Alchemy, and I'm in process. I'm like trying to work out my setup. I'm like, am I going to turn into a company? Like, I don't know. I'm kind of just like trying to forward think a bit here. So currently don't have a website. Instagram's where it's all at.
Beautiful. So yeah, I'll leave that linked below. And if you want to head over and follow me as well at Sacred Space W Tanika Lace on Instagram and TikTok. I'll leave all the links down below, and thank you all for listening. It's been so beautiful having you on.
Thank you so much. I'm so grateful that I was able to share. And yes, what a beautiful first podcast to land on is yours. I'm so excited.
Yay. Thank you, everyone. And I'll be back in your ears next week.